A big welcome back to the Nick Elston Show, Season 6 and Episode 11. I must admit, I've been really excited about this one. I've loved all the episodes so far, but this one's a little bit special. I'm a little bit fanboying as well, to be fair. So today, I've got the one, the only give it up for Ewan Mochrie. Woo!
Thank you. Too much.
Not at all. So just a little bit of background, a little bit of context to why I give that big up for this one. That I was kind of looking for something to read, and as somebody that dabbles a lot in kind of personal development, that kind of thing, that most books you read or most things that you listen to make you feel that if you don't do everything in this book, you're a rubbish human being.
Yeah.
Because everyone do it their way, right? So I was trawling around for something to kind of really get my teeth into. I was back out traveling again with the speaking stuff, and a lot of hours on the road. And I found this book by sheer accident. It was recommended to me by Audible, and genuinely a game changer. And I thought, I've got to kind of reach out to this guy. Little did I know he'd actually come onto the show as well. But ladies and gentlemen, Ewan Mochrie, before we go any further, tell us who you are and kind of what you do and where you're from.
Yeah, so the main thing that I spend most of my time doing is training. So I'm a master trainer of NLP. Now, if people don't know what NLP is, it stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming. So it's kind of it's a personal development sort of toolkit, and it's about how people think and produce the behavior. Now, connected with that, I also train timeline therapy, which came out of NLP, which is good for letting go of emotions and beliefs, changing beliefs. I also do hypnosis as well. I also train hypnosis and coaching. And then I do sort of coaching work in between the training. The main thing I do is training other people. And this is people who are doing it for personal development, or they want to become a coach themselves, or something like that. So that's mainly what I do. I do come from Scotland. That's why I've got this slightly unusual name. And if you want the full version, it's Ewan Campbell Mochrie.
Nice.
But I don't tend to use the full version all the time. But I live in Bolton, and I've lived there for about 4 years.
Very nice, very cool. I love the kind of a clan thing going on with like kind of Ewan. I love that. It's really cool. So I can very easily kind of delve into just having a really open discussion about the book. And for those who have not seen it yet, it's called It's Time. It's by Ewan, and I strongly recommend, and genuinely, I'm not saying this because you're on the show right now, the only book I've recommended to my network in 8 years. And that's how much I value the book.
Well, I appreciate that.
No, you're very welcome. But I guess that was certainly engaged me, but I want to make sure that everybody else, and I guess people maybe that you're connected to, have a deep dive into the world of you. Essentially, you're the person behind what you do. So I guess let's start right at the beginning. Tell us about baby Ewan. Tell us about growing up, education, family life, and what's brought you to our virtual door today.
So I'm one of 3 kids. So I've got an older sister, a younger brother, mum and dad from Scotland. So I was born in Scotland. My dad worked as an engineer and then a manufacturing director. We traveled around quite a lot. So I changed schools, quite a lot when I was younger. And one of the things which my parents still follow today is their sort of Church of Scotland. So they go to the church. Now, they used to take the kids to the church. And obviously, because they get some value out of the community and the way of thinking, and it brings them some comfort and that sort of thing. I must admit, even from a small child, though, I found it really crushingly dull, and it was just boring and cold, is what I remember. But as I got a little bit older, I started sort of because they suggested that you get sort of confirmed into Church of England by then. And I just was curious. I'd ask questions about it because a lot of it didn't make sense. Now, some of it made sense, but some of it just didn't quite make sense. So I've always been a bit curious about, what's going on in the world and how does the world work? And, I always remember when I was maybe about 8 years old, I struck a match and, outside, very safe. And as I held the match, I just wondered if I created my own universe just in the moment of, striking the match. And then it just sort of burnt out and disappeared. And then at school, I quite liked science, so I would sort of do maths. I was quite good at maths, not so good at English, but I could do the maths and physics. I quite like that as well. And then when you get a little bit further into physics, it's like it doesn't quite make sense. All of it. It's like some of it kind of makes sense again, but some of it doesn't doesn't quite fit. And I think what was happening with me is I've been, and I maybe didn't know this at the time, but what I was looking for, how does the world work? So if you understand how the world works, if you can align yourself with how it works, then you will get more out of your life. So what I was also interested in, again, I probably couldn't have articulated when I was younger, but I was interested in personal improvement, being sort of the most you could be, sort of thing. It sounds like a slogan for the army or something, but it's it's that sense of, if I can align with how the world works, and can I then get the most out of life? Now, what I would say on my trainings today, what that is your model of the world, how the world works. How do you think the world works? So you can largely break it down into things like religion, philosophy, science, or some mixture of it. But it was just that sort of continual searching to understand how the world worked that was sort of has been driving a lot of this. But most of the time, you just live your normal life. I actually went to university and did civil engineering at university. Now, I did that because I wanted to join the army when I was younger. Now, I didn't know what to do at university. I could do maths and science and that sort of thing. I went to the Army Careers Office and they said, so what degree are you going to do? I was like, well, I've got no idea. I hadn't thought about it. And they said, because I was looking for sponsorship through the Army. And the Army said, so have you ever considered civil engineering? And I was like, no, but if the Army wants me to do it, that's what I'll do. So I got a place to do civil engineering. And then before they give you sponsorship, you have to go away to some big house in the country somewhere for about 4 days. And you have to do leadership stuff outside. And you have to do presenting and problem solving inside and things like that. And at the end of those 4 days, they said, we don't think you're ready for the Army. And I think they were right. But anyway, we don't think you're ready. Weren't very good at the leadership stuff. The problem solving and presenting was okay, and they didn't like my essays either. So I think I wrote about British balance of power politics in the 19th century, and I don't think they quite like that. But anyway, so I thought, well, the Army doesn't want me. What am I going to do now then? So I thought I better go and do the civil engineering. So I did the civil engineering at Sheffield, and again, it had lots of maths, and it was okay. And I worked in a drawing office a couple of summers, and then after a while, I thought, I don't know if I fancy doing this or not. It just seemed a bit dull in places, actually, particularly highway engineering. That was very dull. But anyway, so some of my mates were looking at accountancy. So I thought, right, okay, maybe I'll do that. But I remember when I was about 20, I was sat I lived in halls at university. I sat in my hall thinking about what to do in my room in my halls. And I thought, what should I do with my life? Now, today I would talk about conscious and unconscious mind. I wouldn't have used that terminology then. But the only thing that emerged into my awareness was to be a teacher. And I thought, well, what could I teach? The only thing I can do is maths. I don't really want to teach that. And I know it's an honorable profession, teaching, but I didn't think I'd earn a lot of money as a teacher. So I kind of pushed that thought to one side. I knew my mates were looking at accountancy. Accountancy firms then took on 10% of all graduates. So I thought, I'll become an accountant then. And I remember even thinking this at the time, I'll learn the language of business and I'll put off what I'm really going to do with my life until later on. Let's not worry about it right now. So I then got a job to be, I worked for Arthur Andersen, actually, which you probably won't remember, but it was a large accountancy firm which went bust because of Enron. But I'd left long before that. That was nothing to do with me. So anyway, so I joined Arthur Andersen, trained as a chartered accountant. I got married and had kids. So I was, it's all very normal. I was just doing what everybody else was doing. Now, all the way through that, I'd had one or two not massively odd experiences, but a couple of odd type experiences, which you think, that doesn't quite fit with this sort of normal sort of world. And one of them was when my grandmother died when I was at university. I knew she was ill and I was supposed to phone home every day to check how she was. And I was working in my room in the hall at university, and I'd forgotten to call. It was about 7 o'clock at night. I was supposed to call about 6-ish, and I'd forgotten. It was about 7. And I was sitting working, and then I heard a phone ring. Now, this is in the 80s. Difficult for people to imagine this today, but in the 80s, no mobile phones. It was a pay phone, which was down flights of stairs through fire doors. It was like sort of half a mile away or something was the nearest phone. But I was sitting working in my room, and I heard a phone ring to the point where I sat up like that. And then I thought, oh, I've got to phone home because I'd forgotten to phone home. So I went and phoned home. Then I found out my grandmother had died. Now, that afterwards, I reflected on it. I think, how did I hear a phone? I couldn't have heard a phone. And then you just sort of think, well, maybe it was my unconscious mind making me sort of think about it. But it sounded external. It didn't sound internal and that sort of thing. So I thought, well, that was a bit strange. And then I had another strange experience a couple of years earlier when I was in the house by myself at home in Bolton, and somebody came around to sharpen knives. Now, he's a small-time con man, and he conned me out of £5, which was quite a lot of money back in the 1980s as well. Conned me out of £5, and he didn't do anything. And I thought I was a bit of an idiot for getting conned out of it. So this was when I was still sort of, playing with the religion a bit, what's going on with that. So I prayed to be given a chance to, another chance to prove that I wasn't the idiot that I now thought I was. And the very next day, somebody else came to the house to sharpen knives when I was in the house by myself. And it was like, I thought, but that's the only two. Now, it's not statistical analysis or anything. That's the only 2 times I remember somebody coming to the house to sharpen knives. I thought, but I didn't think there was a deity listening to my prayers. I started to notice that the outside seems to be connected to the inside. So things that I'm thinking are actually getting reflected in the outside. I thought, that's strange. But again, you have 1 or 2 isolated strange things, and you think, wow, I don't know what's going on with it. And I was just leading a normal life. Married, 2 kids, cats and all that sort of thing. And this is now about 1998 then. And for Christmas the year before or something, my brother bought me a book about remote viewing. Now, I mentioned it briefly in the book, but this was when the US military did remote viewing for about 30 years, starting in the 1970s. Now, it was declassified in 95. That's why people started writing books about it. Now, they couldn't write about classified stuff, but they could write about some stuff which was declassified. And it was basically the Americans using psychic spies to spy on the Russians and that sort of thing. One of the things I remember that they did was, I always thought it was strange. Again, you might not remember this, but when the Pan Am flight blew up and went down over Lockerbie, the Americans very quickly started talking about even before they're going through all the wreckage, they started talking about a Toshiba radio, that the bomb was in a Toshiba. And I was like, how do they know it was in a Toshiba radio? But this is one of the things that the remote viewed, is what had actually happened. So I read this book about, I think it's by David Morehouse, about the remote viewing that they've done the US military. And I thought, well, maybe he's just a bit bonkers, is what I thought. And then a few months later, I was in Waterstones looking at books, because I'm just sort of curious about what's happening in the world still. There's still that thread running through. And I came across a book about astral projection, which is out-of-body experiences. And I thought, well, that's kind of in the same genre. And this was one by William Buhlman. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. Now, in that, he talked about a technique to have an out-of-body experience. So I thought, well, I'll just have a go at doing that then. Because when it doesn't work, I can forget about it. So the very first time I tried to do it, now the technique was very simple. As you fall asleep at night, what you need to do is imagine yourself walking around a room in your house that you know really well. Just walk around, not the bedroom, but another house. I think what you're trying to do is trick your sense of consciousness, the center of your consciousness, out of the physical into something else. I think that's what you're supposed to be doing. But I thought, right, okay, I'll have a go. So I went into it, and I think this is one of the things which is really quite important, is you've got to go into a lot of these things without expectations. A lot of the time when I've done later stuff and I've gone in with expectations, it's not quite worked out, but I went in with no expectations whatsoever. And as I started imagining that as I fell asleep at night, I remember losing consciousness, as you do as you fall asleep. But then I came back into consciousness, and I heard a click in my head as I came back into consciousness. Now, as I came back into consciousness, I could feel it's almost like an electric current running through my body from head to toes. Now, I had read in the book about the vibrational state they talk about. Now, the way I rationalize it is it's maybe you've shifted into a non-physical body. Now, it's close to the physical. The two are kind of interfering with each other. So it's, vibration, frequency type thing. Now, it wasn't painful, but it was very noticeable. But the other thing which was incredibly noticeable, and it's really difficult to describe, is I felt more conscious than I've ever felt. Now, I know you get different levels of consciousness. You feel a bit tired, or you've drunk too much alcohol or something like that. Your consciousness can be different. And sometimes if you're in what psychologists call the flow state, when you're sort of really focused on something, you can be in different levels. So there are sort of different gradations of consciousness, but this is still to this day the sharpest level of consciousness I've ever been in. And I thought, wow, wow. And then I just sort of got a bit tired and lost consciousness. Now, what that did for me, though, is that told me through direct experience. Now, it's only somebody else's experience. You know, you've not had the experience, you know, you don't have the experience, but it's through my own experience that told me that some of this other stuff I'd read about or stuff I'd watched on TV and that sort of thing was real. It wasn't just the physical. There is something else going on. So it was that moment really that told me that working as an accountant is like I can't do that for the rest of my life. That's not going to work. You know, it's just not important enough working as an accountant. So it completely, although, you know, as I said, I always had this sort of thread running through what's going on in the world, be as much as you can of yourself, you know, and all the rest of it. You know, I was working for what was then the world's largest accountancy firm and all that sort of stuff. But it was just it was like, well, that's not going to cut it anymore. And I need to find out more about what's going on, and I need to change my career. So that was about 98. So I don't know what it'd be about 32 or something then, something like that. So although it took me a number of years then to sort of change career, I didn't actually start doing what I do now full time until about the start of 2007. So, you know, I was searching still for quite a while about what to do, but that was really the catalyst that said, you've got to do something else.
Wow. And how do you even start that kind of progression towards what you do now? Because it's not mainstream in the extent of there's a university course to do on it, or how do you actually is it a case
that's a really good question. That's a really good question to ask, because it did take a while, but what I did was I set the intention to do something else. Now what I then had was there were several things I needed to do. And it's like you've got to think about it as it's a timing sort of thing. They say in Eastern philosophy, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. So it's like you kind of have to be ready, and you'll get the bits as you need them. Now, what I started noticing was first steps. What are the first steps? Now, you know, I won't talk a lot about this, but one of the steps I needed to do was I kind of thought I needed to change my relationship. I didn't think that was, if I was going to change my career, I expected my income to go down before it came back up again. And I didn't think the relationship wasn't great anyway, and I didn't think that was going to cut it. So that was a big thing that I needed to do. Now, it took me several years to, I don't know, build up the courage or to actually finally make that decision or whatever. So I was still working as an accountant. This was 2001. That was one of the first big steps that I made, because that seemed to be more aligned with the person that I was to make that change. So that was quite a big thing. And that took 3 years from that point till I actually did that. And then the rest of it was just, I would just take courses. I did a course at a place called the Monroe Institute. This was then 2002. So I ended the relationship 2001. 2002, I think it was 2002 or 3, can't remember now, maybe it was 2002. But anyway, so I took a course at something called the Monroe Institute. Now, Robert Monroe was a guy who did astral projection. So it's, again, similar sort of thing that I'd been looking at before, because I was kind of thinking that maybe some of that, you know, I've got to explore this a bit more and that sort of thing. Now, that's in the States, in Virginia or North Carolina or something like that, over that way. So I did that course, and because of what Robert Monroe did, he was dead by the time, but he's still got the institute there. He was dead by the time I did it. But what he experimented with was with binaural beats. Now, binaural beats, I don't know if you've heard of them, but basically you get a frequency in one ear and another frequency in the other ear, just slightly out of sync, and the brain creates a third frequency out of the two. So it kind of and it has the effect of synchronizing your hemispheres, apparently. So Robert Monroe was using that to experiment about learning while you were sleeping, and he started having spontaneous out-of-body experiences. So he then sold his business, set up this institute, studied it, worked on it many years, did training courses. So I went and did a training there, which was interesting. And I met, while I was there, some of the guys who did the remote viewing for the US military. Because because one of the guys had married Monroe's daughter. And the Monroe Institute used to do some training for the remote viewers as well, and for the US military. So a couple of the guys who did the remote viewing were actually there, and I was chatting to them about things. And one of the things I remember that they did as a training exercise is they used to remote view the Battle of Hastings. Now, what they were doing is they were able to go anywhere in sort of space and time and that sort of thing mentally. Now, remote viewing has actually been, I use the word proven. I don't think materialistic science would agree with it, but it has been proven to work. There have been several university studies which prove, but anyway, whether you believe it or not, it's fine, whatever. But one thing I remember talking, so he did a talk about remote viewing, and we all had a go at it, and I wasn't very good and that sort of thing. But anyway, but we had a chat afterwards, a group of us, not just the, but the group of us had a chat afterwards. And one of the things we were talking about was time. And he said, maybe time's an illusion, is what he said. And I was thinking, time's an illusion, how does that work? But one thing I'd known from just the reading that I'd been doing before and from science I'd read is that science didn't really very well explain what time was or what consciousness was. So those two things, I didn't think science was really explaining in a satisfactory way, to me at least. And then Joseph McGonigal, who was this guy who was one of the remote viewers, he said, well, maybe time's an illusion. And I was like, time's an illusion? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. But so I couldn't, that's why I was still, wondering about that, still working as an accountant. And one thing I noticed when I worked as an accountant is all the businesses I started going in started to be in worse financial situations. So the one that was in 98 overexpanded and went bust because it overexpanded. And I thought, well, that was a bit rubbish. And then the next one, when I joined the next business, that they thought they'd made a certain amount of money in the first year, and then they'd lost some money in the first year, broken even the second year. I was doing the accounts for the third year, and I found out they hadn't actually broken even in the second year. These were audited accounts, but they hadn't broken even. They'd actually lost the same amount of money that they'd done the first year. And nobody knew. They didn't understand it. And so I thought this is worse. And then it was, the businesses were getting worse. And I thought, and sometimes it's like, now I think you get, some say if you've got to go in a different direction, the direction you're currently going in, it's like, it starts not working for you. And it just wasn't working for me. And I didn't want to make a career out of swapping between companies that were sort of in worse and worse situations. So again, I was just researching and thinking, well, what could I do with my life? And one thought I had is maybe I could do coaching. Now, when I researched coaching, NLP came up all the time. Now, the way I talk about it today is NLP and coaching are like two strands of the same piece of DNA. It's far intertwined. You can use NLP for more than just coaching, but one of the principal applications of NLP is coaching. But anyway, so NLP kept coming up. So I thought, right, okay, I'll do the NLP then, because the other thing which happened then is when I was driving around after I found NLP is I started seeing NLP in car number plates. Now, I know it was in car number plates before. I know that. And it didn't mean anything to me then, but now it means something to me, but I started to notice it. So I thought, right, maybe it's a sign. Let's treat it as a sign then, do the NLP training. Now, when I did the NLP training, when I got the materials before the training, it was like, yeah, all of this seems to make sense. I kind of understand, because it was about, personal responsibility and how you think and produce your behavior. I thought, well, yeah, this kind of makes sense. And then when I did the training, on the training, I looked at the guy who was doing it and I thought, I could do that. Now, at the start of the week's training, I thought it would take me 10 years to be able to do that. But I let go of some emotions, change some beliefs, and integrate some conflict and all that sort of thing. And then by the end of the week, I thought, I bet I can do that in 2 years, not 10 years. And eventually I did it in 18 months from the point after I did that training. So it was like, you just, it's a great question you asked, but what you do is you just follow the path. And it's almost as somebody else has said, later on, only a couple of years ago, somebody said, it's like when you drive your car, the headlights just, if it's really dark, there's no street lights or whatever, the headlights just illuminate the path just ahead of you, but you can't see all of it. But what you've got to do is you just got to follow the path in front of you, and it will lead you wherever you're going. And you don't necessarily know where you're going when you go out on the journey. You go on the journey and you find out where it's going. And that's kind of what it's been like. I said it did take quite a long time. I'm sure other people do it a lot faster, but it did take quite a long time. But eventually I came across the NLP. I thought, yeah, I could do that. And then I went through all the training, practitioner, master practitioner, trainer, and then I started running courses. So I did the trainers training 2006, and then started doing it full time. Well, from 2006, actually, yeah. So
Wow.
that's what I've been doing since.
So many rabbit holes have popped up as you were chatting, and I could dive down right now. I mean, I guess the first one that really pops into my mind is working on the principle that a lot of people that feel safe and happy in their very closed off space, and a comfort zone kind of thing, people that stay in the same city all their lives, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Following that logic, the bigger that life and experience comes to you, does it make kind of actually reality seem smaller for you in that sense? Does that make sense?
So it's, as you expand, everything expands. Have you got children? Did you have children yourself?
No, a small Shih Tzu, but that's about it.
Near enough. Now, when people have children and that sort of thing, what they find is, they've got they love the people around them, and when they have a child, the love expands, and it's like, wow, I don't know where that came from, but it's like it sort of expands. Now, I'm more of a big picture sort of person anyway. So I like, and I won't go into the whole Myers-Briggs stuff, but you can get people who are more big picture. People are extroverts, introverts. People like big picture. People like detail. So one of the things which I like anyway is big picture. So I like sort of bigger picture concepts and ideas and things like that. But what I think overall is, as you grow and develop yourself, you grow into more of who you are, and your horizons expand. You still have problems, you still have challenges all the time, because you're growing into more of who you are. Now, whatever people do in their life is perfectly okay. So if people do want to stay in the same place, if people do want to do the same job, that's perfectly okay. The experience, you can't invalidate anything. Everything is valid. If you're having the experience of it, it's valid. That's what people want to do, fine. Because you can explore and develop in different ways. It's that you don't have to sort of, explore all of the universe or, anything like that. So everything that anybody does is okay. The one thing I would encourage people to do is to make sure they're realizing their potential. What potential do you have in you? And are you realizing your potential? And let go of fear. One thing I do say to people is the world is safe. Now, although I say the world's safe, yes, you can get ill and people can suffer and all the rest of it. But where I've got to now, and other people can have their beliefs or whatever, but where I've got to now is that consciousness sort of survives, physical death and that sort of thing. So it's fundamentally a safe experience. Yes, might be painful, uncomfortable at times, for sure, but it's fundamentally safe. So, take that step and expand out a little bit more. But, if you don't want to and you want to do something, well, fine, you don't have to, one of the things I do on one of the trainings, I had a guy who talked about his passion being vehicle recovery. And I was like, oh, thank God somebody's passionate about vehicle recovery, because when my car breaks down, I want somebody coming to see me who's passionate about it. I don't want somebody who's coming to see me because, they don't want to do it. They want to do something else. So follow your passion in life, whatever it is. And what you'll find is it will support you. You'll find the doors will open. That's kind of, what I did is just followed the path and allowed it to to go where it was going to go, and it supports you. It supports you as you do it, if you engage in that, and if you sort of let go of your fears. Now, the other thought I carried with me as I made the change of career was, if it doesn't work, I'll just go back and be an accountant. So I had that to fall back on. So it's kind of trusting that things are going to be okay.
Profile Me is a super shareable mobile application designed to help professionals grow their personal brand. Proudly paperless, this powerful tool packs the power of web, social media, and messaging into one beautifully designed interface that offers a unique and human-centric way to connect and build trust with clients. Easy to share on any platform and easy to save to any phone's home screen. With Profile Me, getting referred has never been easier.
The two biggest things that, and I'm actually kind of re-listening to your book at the moment, is I think the two biggest things that jumped out at me to start with were that kind of line of we are kind of spirits having the human experience.
Yes.
And privately, we've spoken about that as well, because that's an interesting one, that if we're all having our own experience, and how does that then interact with other people? Could you touch on that for the audience a second?
Yeah. So one of the things. So just expand a little bit, and then I'll come back to the point. So one of the things that I believe is that we are spiritual beings, and we are having a physical experience. So you don't have a soul. You've got to be careful how you say this next bit, so I'll say it slowly. You are a soul. So you have to be careful how you say it. You have to be very careful how you say that. You have a body. Right now, the other place, which two things which I mentioned earlier, the book talks about, is time being an illusion, and consciousness is prime, and everything is inside your consciousness. So the way, so what I'll do is I'll talk about time. I'm going to come to the point, but I'm going to just do a little segue first.
Yeah.
So one of the things about time is that, again, I've come to discover, and I think this is what quantum mechanics says, and the physics and all, because I read a book in 2006 as well by a physicist called Julian Barber, which is called The End of Time. Now, that was after I'd done the Monroe Institute. And when I read Barber's book a few years later, because I was like, how does time work? Suddenly, all the ideas about time fell into place. Now, Barber didn't talk about consciousness, but he talked about time. And it's like, oh, right. When you understand what time is, then you can understand consciousness. Now, the way I understand time then is everything exists now. So now all of your life experience happens now, all of it. You're always in the now all the time, which most people just kind of ignore, but you're constantly living your life in the now all the time. Now, the way Julian Barber talked about what time is he says we measure change and call it time. The thing that's constant is change, not time. Now, the way to imagine that is like a movie. When you go to the cinema, when you watch a film, now it used to be, I don't know what it is in the digital age, but I think it's still something like this. You see 24 frames a second on the screen. Now, they're all individual static frames, but what you see is depth, time, movement. You see those things, but actually what's really there is 24 static frames a second is what you see. Now, that's what that's what I think reality is like, and what time's like. Now, before you go and watch the film, all of the frames exist of that film. Every single frame exists. And what you do is you go and watch it in sequence, and you get the experience of time. But all the frames exist already. So you can have the experience of time, but time isn't fundamental to existence. So that was one of the things that, having kind of understood that, and then, I don't need to go to all the steps that leads to the idea, but then the idea is that what you're doing is you're taking an individual frame of information about reality, and it's like a photograph or something like that. And what you do is you take that frame and you project the information through your consciousness, and you create the reality that you're in. So you're in your own reality. You're creating everything in your own reality. Now, this is the point you were asking about other people then. Now, what other people do is they take the same information that exists, and they project in their consciousness through the same sort of information, if you see what I mean. So what they do is they create a version of you in their consciousness, and you create a version of them in your consciousness. And it gives us the sense of being able to interact with other people, but we're making the other people out of our own consciousness. Now, I still interact with them as if they're another person, different, because they are another person. At some level, they are another person. But basically, it's the understanding the physics. It's a multiverse. So everything is a multiverse. So that's what reality is. So say if I was in a relationship and I make decisions in a relationship, which affects my partner in the relationship, I'll end up with the version of her in the relationship who's impacted by the things that I've done. Now, if I made different choices, I end up with a different version of her, which is impacted by my choices differently. Now, it'll still look the same, still looks like the same person, acts like the same person. We have a shared history, but it's actually, there's different versions. You make different choices, you end up with a different version of other people. It's kind of that sort of thing. And I think what that then raises questions about is what agreements have you got? You maybe got, before you have this, and it still sounds linear when I say that, but before you have this experience, you've made agreements with people that, we'll sort of explore this together. But you've got choice within that. It's not just, there's just everything's pre-decided. No, you got choice within it. That's where the free will is. So we could do this, and we could do this. And it's just there'll be somebody else somewhere that you're not connected to experiencing the other things that you don't do.
And when you see the way you describe it,
it is a bit mind-blowing, but
it is, but also in a way which is really, and I mean, I say palatable as in understandable, because it's a very, let's go there first, actually. I think it's one of those things that very often the reaction to people not understanding things, they can get very aggressive, defensive, or dismissive.
Yes.
I've always been very much open to just asking more questions about things.
Yes.
We should need to know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But there is that kind of element of that if suddenly these rules are changed from what we're kind of conditioned to believe, what you're saying, as you put in the book, it then changes our relationship with things like death or alien interaction, or it's such an amazing, it's such an amazing kind of shift change that's when you kind of come back on yourself thinking, like, actually, it's going to be quite a leap for me to really believe this, in a sense.
Yes.
You're breaking down everything.
That's why I would simplify it down to two things that you need to remember. One is now this is personal development stuff anyway, but it's aligned with what I'm saying, right? You're responsible for your life. What you think about it, what you do with it, and how you feel about it. You're responsible for that. And the second thing is what you put out is what you get back. Now, what you put out is what you get back. That's called the golden rule, and it exists in all religions in different words. It's called karma, or treat other people the way you want to be treated, but it exists in every single religion. And it's also comes from the idea that what you're experiencing is a reflection of self. Now, again, this is a bit philosophical. I'll say it, but it's maybe a bit philosophical, so we'll maybe sort of scoot over it a bit. But it's the idea that everything is one thing. So if time's an illusion, everything exists now. Well, it's all one thing. And we're all, although we're having separate experiences, we're all connected at some point. It's like white light broken up through like a prism, like Pink Floyd's album, into different colors. So it's all one thing. Now, if it's all one thing, how can you have an experience? Because if you think about your experience, it's dualistic. There's always two things. There's me having an experience of something. So how can you get dualism within a oneness? And this is some philosophy, but what it boils down to then is self-reflection. So this is why what you put out is what you get back. Now, one of the interesting things connected with that is, so I've read quite a lot. I've not had a near-death experience myself, fortunately, but I've read quite a lot about them. And people who have deep near-death experiences, they get a life review. Now, in the life review, they don't re-experience their whole life. They experience what they made other people experience. So people who were impacted by them, you experience what they were feeling. So, say I'd split up with a girlfriend when I was younger or something, and I'd done it in an unpleasant manner, then in the life review, I get what she experienced. That's what I feel, right? Now, so you either get back what you put out here, or if you don't get it here, you've got a life review where you'll get an experience of it back then. So to simplify, it's just and these two things help people then to relook at what their lives are. This is why it's actually a positive type thing. This is why I think we can solve problems that we have on the planet, because if you get the sense that it's about what you believe and what you put out in your behavior, or it's what you get back, then people will start treating other people a little bit differently. If you understand it like that. So you can understand all the interpretation of science. Now, the other thing I'd say about the science and that sort of thing, the way to think about this is it's like it's a new paradigm. Now, the word paradigm and paradigm shift is overused, but it's the idea that you can take the information as is. Instead of looking at it like that, you say, actually, we need to look at it like this. So it's just the same information. You may be familiar, well, it's in the book, but you may be familiar with the idea of the old woman, young woman, optical illusion. It's the same information, but you either see it like this or you see it like this. So basically, it's a way to interpret the physics is what I'm describing as well. So instead of doing it in a materialistic way we're doing it at the minute, I say, oh no, it's not like that, it's like that. So it changes the paradigm. But the two principal things in that change of paradigm are You're responsible for your life, and what you put out is what you get back. Now, you don't need to understand how you get to that new paradigm or how time works or what consciousness is. Just understand those two things. Because if you understand those two things, then how you interact in the world changes. And then your life changes. It's that sort of thing. Because it's a multiverse. You don't ever change the world you're on. You change yourself, and the world you experience changes. The sort of positive world that we all want to live in, I would imagine we all want to live in, already exists. We just need to change ourselves so that we end up in that and we have the experience of that. So, this is some of the way it changes thinking, if you see what I mean.
I mean, genuinely, this could be the longest podcast episode ever, but I'll be very mindful of that. But it's I think your passion for it really shines through as well. And what I also liked was it came from a voice of reason, and I mean that in a not glib way. Very often, it's this kind of content is delivered in a way which is very much kind of like forced down your throat. But even in this interview, or kind of saying things, well, believe it or not, take it or leave it. And I like that. I think that's
Well, I think it's important for people to make up their own minds. You've got to make up your own mind. You've got to have your own experience. And what you often find, the thing which is behind other people trying to force their views on others is because they don't believe it.
Yeah.
There's something about it they don't believe. So they want other people to believe it to reassure them that what they say is right. But if you really do believe it, you're not bothered whether people believe it or not. Believe whatever you like. It's some of that sort of thing goes with it. And if I'm allowed to choose what I believe, everybody else is allowed to choose what they believe.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of that sort of thing.
You mentioned how you learn in terms of when the student's ready kind of mentality. I absolutely understand that. But in terms of the depth of knowledge and the insight that you've managed to pick up, who were your kind of people that kind of guided you, mentored, or was it intuition led, or was it a combination of these?
Well, it's probably a combination of things. So I like reading, so I read quite a lot, and I do. I don't do loads of trainings, but I do training when it's appropriate. So certainly in the NLP sort of field, I trained with somebody called Tad James, who he passed a couple of years ago, but trained with him. So he was fairly influential for me. I'm almost a little bit reluctant to mention this next thing, but one of the things which I also listen to is, I'll mention it anyway. Let's see what happens. So one thing I also listen to is channeled extraterrestrial content. Yeah. Now, this is, it's like I've come across channeling several times, like going through the research I've been doing, and it's come across some at the Monroe Institute. Now, you've got to be careful with channel content, because I could just say, oh, I'm going to do some channeling now. I've got a message for you and that sort of thing. So you've got to be careful with it, because what's the source of the content? And, is it being, even if it was coming from somewhere, is it being filtered, or, is the guy just making it up or something like that? So you've got to be careful with it. So back in about either 2010 or 2011, I'd been talking about extraterrestrial life to my son, and he found something on the internet, and he said, Dad, what do you make of this? And it was some guy doing some channeling. I thought, oh, you got to be careful with channeled stuff. You're never quite sure what it is. But I listened to it, and I thought, well, actually, this is quite good. It was personal development content. As I listened to more of it, it was all personal development content, and it was delivered in a way that was consistent, fast, with a bit of humor. And I thought at that time, well, I'm quite good at doing personal development content like this. But this guy's pretty good at doing it too, actually. And if it was just him, why wouldn't you just do it yourself? Why go through the whole charade and make it up as being some channeled extraterrestrial thing or something? So I've been listening to that since about 2011. I've seen the guy live a few times and that sort of thing. So I think that's influenced my thinking, because the other thing is, he's saying the same thing about reality. Now, I hadn't completely got to all of that by the time I heard it, but I pretty much got to the same place. Hadn't quite. Consciousness, I was still, it's in NLP, this idea about what you put out is what you get back, talk about perception is projection and that sort of thing. Time was an illusion. I sort of got to that already, reading Julian Barber's work and, talking to the remote viewing guys. So I kind of got to that, but he was putting it was the same place. It's like, this is what I mean about when the students read The Teacher Appears. I'd kind of got just about to the same place, Then I started listening to this content, and he said exactly the same thing. And it was like, it's all sort of pennies dropping, things aligning. It's like, oh, right, I get it now. I get it. It's that sort of thing. So, so that's, that is one of the things that's influenced me too. So, the people that I've trained with and that content, I like reading, so I read stuff. So.
Do you find that your bigger picture way of thinking in any capacity makes the small things mundane for you?
Not completely, no, because you'd have to do mundane things. In the East, they say before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So you still have to do the mundane sort of stuff. Again, I can't remember the quotes by, but after some enlightening experience, next laundry. So you still have to do all this sort of stuff. And what's interesting is, can you share things with other people? Can you help other people? And it's having interactions with other people. I like having this interaction with you. That's why I'm doing it. It's why I make time for it, because it's interesting and that sort of thing. So that's not mundane at all. That's interesting. And just having a drink with a friend or playing a game with a friend, or it's just that is like, that's experience. That's what it is. That's what you're here for. You're here for those sorts of experiences. And I like ironing. Right? Not everybody likes ironing, but I quite like ironing. But so, I don't mind doing that. I'll put something on TV and I'll do some ironing or something. The thing that I've kind of shifted away from, and I didn't do much of this anyway, is I don't do rubbish drama on TV or, it's like soap. Well, I never did soap operas, but, you watch some drama on TV or the sort of the usual stuff that gets churned out on the channels. It's like, well, I'm not interested in that. And the news, I read the news on the internet, so I pick and choose what I get. But I don't watch TV news now and that sort of thing, because it's just, we're asking the wrong questions. We've got the wrong sort of leadership. The leadership in politically and in the corporate world and that sort of thing. It's pretty dire right now. Yeah. And some of that, I think, is to do with the fact that the current systems we've got are falling apart. And what we need is new systems to come up underneath. And there'll be new leaders with new systems. The new leaders won't be leading the old systems, because the systems are going down. And this is why we're seeing really, and we have for quite a number of years, political leadership in particular is just awful. So I kind of drift a bit out of the news, and I'm sort of drift out of crummy TV, and I don't read many novels, occasionally. And I have been watching The Last of Us recently, so I do watch some TV. Is
it any good? I've not watched it yet. I've kind of recorded it, but not watched it. Is it good?
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. So I got burnt by Game of Thrones, though. I watched that, and then the last two series were just awful.
Oh, right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm very cautious about investing any time in anything like that. But anyway, yeah. So mainly with the point is, life is in some of the mundane. That is where the life is. That's where the experience is. But what's most important is your relationship with other people, helping other people, interacting with other people. What I think you take with you is the connections you make and the learning you've got and the love you've shared. It's these sorts of things you take with you. So these things are important.
Thank you. I think I'm also mindful. I'm also not sure if it's because that's where my mind goes, and I'm very open. I like exploring things and talking openly about stuff. But there certainly has been a rise in kind of, whether it's public interest or public awareness of things like multiverses or things that are more on the holistic, open-minded kind of thing. Yes. Do you think this is leading to some form of shift? Or
yes, I totally do. I totally think it's. I can't sort of draw it effectively on here, but there's a change model I talk about in training, and it goes, and so time's going to run that way. The vertical scale is how well does your thinking match with reality? So it's psychological effectiveness. What's your psychological effectiveness? And you go along like this, and it's fine, and then you hit this point, and you start going down. So everything's fine, then you get doubts and things get worse and worse and worse and worse. Then you hit the bottom of it, and then you move back up again, start rebuilding beliefs, behaviors, and the rest, and you end up at a higher point than you were before, and you carry on from there. Now, you might go through the cycle again, but I think the world's going through this. Now, this is one of the reasons that, again, I've sort of, wanted to do the training, because I think I want to be helping people on the positive side of, rebuilding thinking and that sort of thing. And I used to say to people on training, the world's changing and that. And I know it changes all the time, but people would look at you as if you're nuts. What are you talking about? Then in 2016, Leicester won the Premier League title, and everybody was like, "Well, I didn't really expect that." And then Britain voted for Brexit, and it was like, "Well, I didn't expect that." And then America voted to have Donald Trump as the president, and everybody's like, "Well, I didn't expect that." And then, you know, we've had the pandemic, and Russia's trying to start World War III and all the rest of it. So, so I think more people are seeing and sensing and feeling this change that's, which, you know, I think there's quite a fundamental change going on. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, thank you. I think the question I usually ask people is, away from professional life, kind of like, how do you recharge and stuff? But your personal and professional is so intertwined, and this is essentially just you. But is there anything you're really into that you love? You mentioned reading. Do you like anything else in sports?
So one thing I do, I quite like playing board games and games, you know, with friends and things like that. I quite like that. I just like the, you know, the intellectual challenge, the fun, and, you know, that sort of stuff. So cool. quite like that. You know, I watch a bit of sports. I do quite like American football. I follow that since the 1980s. So, you know, I like that. So a little bit of sport, you know, like cricket, bit of football, American football. And yeah, like board games, you know, went away with a friend and his family and my son over New Year. And we spent a lot of time playing games and that sort of thing. So yeah, I like.
Fantastic. Well, Ewan, big thank you for coming on the show. Genuinely, I could talk to you for literally hours, but you have a weekend to get to, and everyone else has got stuff to get to. We're recording this on a Friday, but for everybody else, please do connect, check out Ewan's trainings. I'll put the website, the details in the bio. Do buy his book, whether you listen or read. It's time. Absolutely get into that. I promise you, it's going to be the best investment made in a long, long time. And the fact they've actually got an author on here, and I volunteered to promote the book, shows exactly how humble this guy is. So, but before I let you go back into the wilds of Bolton, I am now the MC of the O2 Arena in London. 20,000 people have paid their hard-earned money to come and hear you do your thing. You're sat in the green room, you hear me call your name, and your walk-on music kicks in, that song that motivates you, lifts you, to get you at peak state. Ewan Mochrie, what would your walk-on song be and why?
So one I've been listening to a lot this year, and I listened to it at the start of the day before I do training, and it's The Common People by Pulp. Yeah, and the reason I like that is it builds. So it starts, you know, sort of slowly, and some of it's like, you know, I like some of the phrasing in it, you know. So she said she wants to sleep with common people like me, and then he says something, but she didn't understand, and then, you know, so it's like, you know,
that's a great tune.
Yeah, I like that. I like the way it just builds up as it goes through. So
I'm excited to add that to the playlist. That's really cool. So from me to you, Ewan Mochrie, big round of applause.
Thank you very much. It's great to be on here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Amazing guest. Thank you for donating your busy time to kind of inspire us all. So everybody else, please do stay tuned for next Monday's episode. You know I'm not a details guy, so hit like, subscribe, whatever it takes to get you back here. And in the meantime, take care, be well, stay happy. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.